So welcome to Tipsy Testing, everybody. We're delighted to have you here this afternoon where we can talk about testing and have a little cocktail together and wind down the week. My name is Jessica Moore. I'm the Customer and Partner Success Manager with Inflectra, and we're here today with Adam Sandman. Adam is the Director of Technology at Inflectra, where he is interested in technology, business, and innovation. He has been a programmer since the age of 10, and he has been working in the IT industry for the past 20 years. Adam, can you tell us a fun fact about yourself?
Okay, and a different fun fact this time, because you might have watched the other recordings. I used to work at a bar in a place called Swansea in Wales, and it was famous for the Mumbles Mile. It was a mile of bars and restaurants, and students would start at the beginning, and you walk the mile, and there were like 30, 40 bars and restaurants, well, not restaurants, bars, all the way if you got to my place at the end, which was on the pier. So you had this pier, like a Victorian pier, and you had this bar at the end, and people had been drinking from like 5 o'clock and got to you about 7 or 8 at 9. When they got to us, it was all chaos. I mean, people were like falling off the pier, going down the rocks into the beach. It was like the most mad place. It's now been closed down because of health and safety violations and all kinds of crazy stuff. But I still love that place, and I think I learned my love of music from working there as a bar person, and cocktails too. So appropriate for tipsy testing.
Nice. Speaking of music, we have another music lover with us today. Paul Grizzaffi is the principal automation architect at Magenic. He has spent his career in automation, and he has a blog at responsibleautomation.wordpress.com. So please check that out. And Paul, do you have a fun fact for us?
Yeah, for about 4.5 minutes, I was a member of the Scorpions.
No way.
About 4.5 minutes.
Winds of change.
Well, what happened was there were some radio winners that were supposed to go up on stage and sing backup for one of the songs, and they were drunk and obnoxious. And Klaus said, "We're not going to do it with them." But my buddy used to tour with Scorpions, and we were backstage hanging out. And they're like, "Y'all want to come up and do it?" It's like, "Yeah, of course I want to come up and do it. I can stand up in front of 16,000 people. I'm good. We're good." So that was fun.
What did you sing?
They had just released the Animal Instinct record, so the single was Wild Child. So we sang the backup on Wild Child.
Wow,
that is awesome.
That was fun.
Cool, fun fact.
A big rush being in front of that many people.
Oh my God! And with the Scorpions. Okay, that's cool. Nice.
Very cool.
Good. 2 good fun facts today.
You have a fun fact, Jessica?
Do I? Oh, now you're putting me on the spot.
But Jessica is a fun fact. I mean, come on.
That's right. That's true.
Yeah.
At the end, come back to it at the end. How about that?
Okay. That's, I have to come up with something that aligns with music now, because you guys did some that were music and drinking related.
Right.
And most of those music and drinking combined, I don't really remember.
That's a fun fact.
Things happen. Yeah, right.
So let's start with a question about music. Is there a song that sums up your philosophy? That could be a life philosophy or a testing philosophy, but since we're talking about tipsy testing, perhaps there's a testing philosophy. Paul, you want to start?
So no, there's not, because there's like a group of songs and they kind of move around and such. One of my keynotes that I've given is called Test Your Metal. METAL, and it's how metal songs and lyrics apply to testing and automation concepts. So lots of different songs, like Crazy Train, which is my favorite song ever in the history of ever since I heard it the first time, to Iron Maiden's Wasted Years about sunk cost, and Diamond Head's Helpless about business. So there's all sorts of different types of songs and lyrics that apply to different parts of what I think about testing and automation and in my career in general.
So I didn't get one specific song there, but there's definitely a genre.
Oh, absolutely. It's pretty much metal. There's some rock too, but pretty much it's metal.
Nice.
For me, yeah, for the ones I was thinking about, the one song that I always think of is REM. It's the end of the world as we know it. Because what usually happens is when we're in the final stages of about to release at the end of a sprint, and we find something, and generally speaking, everyone's running around with their hair on fire. And as far to the testers and maybe some of the developers, it's like the end of the world as we know it. And usually your job as kind of the coach or the test manager is to help dial back the emotion. Like, it's not the end of the world as we know it. Let's look at what happened. Let's look at the data. Let's see what the risk is, understand the risk, and make a decision. But at that exact moment when you find something that you didn't expect, that you didn't realize was in there, and how did this happen? It is the end of the world as we know it at that moment.
So basically, if we're going to metalize that, then we'll go with Europe's The Final Countdown, right?
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, because the product manager is like, we're going to release on Monday. We're releasing to DevOps. We're going to push into production in 2 minutes. What do you say? Yes or no? No. Yeah. Something like
Nice. Great. What is the best way to learn any coding language? And this is a question that was submitted by Prabhat Shukla. And I should credit actually the first question with Arlene Andrews. We had people sending in questions today. So thanks, Arlene. Thanks, Prabhat. Adam, would you like to take a stab at that first?
The best way to learn a coding language. I mean, I learned to program at the age of 8 in what was then BASIC on a 32-bit computer. So
Youngster.
you want punch cards, the old. No, 32K was a lot of memory back in those days. I mean, I remember people starting on 1K, the Sinclair ZX81 with 1K. I mean, I think what I find is really good to learn a language is find a problem that interests you and try and build something. Because I think if you just try and learn a language by reading books or reading a website, you just get in paralysis. Find something that's fun. I remember I once built, ironically for this meeting, a cocktail recipe website. I was learning Perl and CGI. I wanted to build an interactive website. This is the first ever interactive website I built, and it was a thing for tracking recipes. You type in the ingredients, it will build your recipe. I know people who did things around supermarkets. One guy was into discount grocery items, so we built a website where you could track you typed in like I want beans, and it would tell you the cheapest beans you could get. So find something that's interesting to you and build something that's fun, because then you'll actually learn a lot more than if you just read a bunch of books and try and somehow learn it through reading. Doing is the best way, at least for me.
Well, thanks for taking my answer, dude. Are you like looking at my paper over here?
No,
No, but I'll echo what Adam said. I don't normally apply it to, hey, build your private thing on the side. I usually more equate it to take the intro stuff. There's a lot of good intro stuff out there, and then use it to do your job. What's something about your job that you could really write a little program to help you do, especially in the world of automation? I'm not talking about taking your test case and turning it into a test script. I'm talking about what's something that you do 30 times a day that you wish you didn't have to do. Write a dinky little script in whatever that language is or a little program in that whatever that language is to help you do that thing, because then you're motivated to finish it, and it doesn't feel like you've just done homework. It feels like you've done work and accomplished something a little more that way. And
Nice.
Going on to the discount grocery, I had a friend who he had a business called, and he called it I don't remember what he called it, but he called himself Senor Carne.
Oh wow.
Mr. Meat.
Mr. Meat.
Yeah, it was like Mr. Plow from The Simpsons, except it was Mr. Meat. And what he would do is he would buy up meat that was going to be out of date within a few days and sell it at a discount. So it was still good, but it was just coming close to that date, and the grocery stores didn't want to deal with it, or the distributors didn't want to deal with it. So he bought it up and sold it out of his store.
Mr. Meat. I wouldn't want to be
before
Senor Carne.
that's a better name.
Right.
And this is before the time when the Tiger King was gathering up all the leftover meat at Walmart and starting.
Oh no, this was like 10 years ago. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I heard some zoo in, I think it was at Berlin or maybe in Frankfurt. Someone in Germany is going to feed its lesser valuable animals to its more valuable animals. Like, oh my God, that's terrible. This is a real story, by the way. I'm not making this up.
No, I saw that. They're not going to do it. It's that they have a contingency to do it if they can't get
their backup
the food for the other. Yeah, it's their backup plan, right?
Disaster
the
recovery.
So-called nuclear option.
The DRP.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's a shame that they have to even think about that. That's too bad.
Yeah, the cat.
There is a section at the Audubon Zoo in New Orleans that has recipes for the animals that are in the cage. Now, it's not for all the animals, obviously, but they're for some of the indigenous ones that people tend to cook with. Yes.
You mean recipes for the animals to feed the animals in the cage, or the animals to make from the animals you're watching?
Yes.
Oh, I remember.
To consume said animal.
I remember going to it. We live in the Maryland area, and there's Montgomery County used to have a fair, or maybe it still has a fair every year. And they had like a cow, and above the cow they have like recipes of barbecue and like brisket. And, like,
There
isn't
you
that a bit
go.
weird? It's a bit weird, isn't it? I don't know. Not my thing. But all right.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Or like the barbecue restaurants, they have like the little pink pig with the guitar playing, like Red Hot and Blue,
Yeah.
and like, there's no offense, not picking on you, but like, it is kind of weird, an anthropomorphic, cute thing being, you're eating it and watching it.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess it's all right.
Hey, Pop, pass the ribs. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea for this weekend. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Let's do one more question before we talk about our cocktails. How has teleworking affected your daily work in software development and or testing? Paul?
So me personally, not very much, except everybody else that is now teleworking, because I work from home pretty much exclusively unless I'm going to a conference or to a client site. There's no Magenic office here in the Dallas area, so I work from home. Technically, I am the Dallas office. But what I've noticed is people tend to understand. Yeah, there you go. People tend to understand not so much the pain, but just some of the logistical aspects a little more. Now with Magenic, we're lucky. So many of our clients are cool with us being remote. So, okay, you're not in the office, you're at home, but you're doing the same job. We're very used to dealing with people who aren't sitting right next to us or are in the office down the hall. But I have seen a lot of other people putting out blogs and webinars and stuff around, okay, how do you work from home now? How do you deal with this? For me, the biggest change has been having the family at home as well, because everybody's home now, and just working out boundaries, but also times where I can go and help my wife out and give her a break so she can do things that are not taking care of 6-year-old twins, right? Because that's a hard job for a whole day. I was doing it for an afternoon. She's doing it for most of a day now, and it's a challenge. So that's one of the big things that I've seen there.
Great. Adam?
And the question is it was, how has teleworking affected your daily life and working and testing? That's yeah. I mean, I guess this is a few weeks, this is like several months for us now. We've been talking about this. So it's sort of evolving because, 2 or 3 weeks ago, when we started these Tipsy Testings, the biggest challenge, I think, was that we had people in Europe and other countries that work for us who'd always been remote. So for them, it was no big deal. And we as a company, I think, had to adjust to the idea that we're now all equal. So it democratized the meetings. So in the past, we had people in the office coming in who were kind of the first class citizens, and we had people who worked in Boston or in Europe who would join these calls, and we wouldn't think about them too much. But now we're all working remotely, and I think we're going to continue that. Even when we all go back to the office, we'll make sure that every place that people work from is equal. But I think what's changed over the last couple of weeks since that, probably original conversation, is that there's a fatigue factor. It's not so much that people miss necessarily the working in the office, it's that people miss working from a different place. Like in the old days, people might work from their office, they might go to a co-working space, they might go to a coffee shop or a Starbucks. It's being in the same place all the time is I think hard for some people. It feels like time is standing still. So if there are ways that you can make that different, maybe it's working from a different room of your house. Like I know Taya from our office, she was working from the basement for a couple of weeks, then she switched to her bedroom, and stuff like that. It was small, but I think it made a emotional difference. It felt like a different place. And so things like that, I think mixing it up, I think, can help, because I think it's this fatigue of like this endlessness, this sort of feeling that we're in this continuum helps. So I think finding things to make work feel different will help. But I think a lot of the technology has been fixed. A lot of the tools we have gotten better. Now we're in kind of this long haul, this drudgery. How do we make it interesting, and so we don't kind of lose hope along the way?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I can't tell you how much I'd love to go back to the office right now.
Right, and I'm very lucky, I will say, as sort of CEO of the company, I do get to go to the office, and I took my whole family there on Thursdays. We had cleaners coming to the house, and everyone was like so excited to be at the office. Like even though it's my 2 kids came with me to the office, and we gave each a different room, and we watered your plants, and we watered Teresa's plants, and we're like, oh my God, it's so fun to be in an empty office. There's no one here. We're in a different part of the town. We went to Chick-fil-A, got takeout. I was like, wow, it's different fast food takeout. It's amazing. It was it was like that was the best Chick-fil-A we'd ever eaten. And the reality was it was cold and probably lukewarm and didn't matter, but it felt great.
It was different.
It was different. It was the feeling of different, I think, was the big thing that we all enjoyed.
Yep. So Paul, I saw you take a sip of something. What are you drinking today?
So y'all know I'm a pretty simple guy when it comes to my drinks and stuff. So I am doing a Kettle One, which is vodka on the rocks, in my New Orleans Saints vintage gas station tumbler. You know, back in the old days where you'd go and you'd buy a bunch of gas, you would get premiums, not premium gas, mind you, but premiums, right?
Right.
Cups, glasses, posters, all sorts of stuff from the gas station. And this is some of the stuff that lasted from there. And then vodka rocks is my preference when I'm just kind of hanging out like this. But I am also a wine and beer guy. So as we talked about earlier, I'm game for most things.
Except for gin, right?
Well, you know what? Hey, I'm willing to try her small batch gin.
Cool.
Oh, look at that.
Green Hat.
This is Green Hat. I'd never heard of this before. It actually has a stamped batch number on it, 305. So
Ooh,
I don't know. I
look at
guess
that.
I'm kind of a guinea pig. It's pretty juniper-y, but I really like that. So
I like Green Hat. It's good. It's actually brewed in DC. It's brewed in
Oh,
Washington, DC,
nice.
in
Yeah.
the old warehouse that used to be owned by the Hex department store that was bought by Macy's back in the whole acquisition, and they shut it down, and it's in a bad part of town, and now it's a gin distillery.
that's
Nice.
cool. I sense a work field trip in our future.
I was going to say a field trip. Once this all ends, we're unlocked. We're going to go to a field trip. Let's
Right
do that.
on. Right on.
Keep
Right
going.
on. And then the reason and you were mentioning the juniperiness, if that's a word.
It is
The reason
now.
I like the Kettle One is there a slight buttery finish that makes it taste different, at least to my palate, from all the other vodkas out there. I mean, there's some very, very clean, good tasting vodkas out there, but this one's a little different, and I've sort of gravitated towards it because it is different.
Do they age it in something that has like a buttery barrel or some kind of? No?
Not, I've not delved into that. I've delved far more into some of the wines that I've drank that I have drunk than
Consumed.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm a grammar guy, and it bothers me when I don't know the right word to say. But yeah, this is it's unique from what I've found from the other vodkas.
Cool.
So perhaps that's another cocktail tasting challenge that we could do. This tipsy testing, the history of tipsy testing is it all started when we were at a conference and we decided to try to taste the difference between Manhattans based on what did we use, Adam? We had one with rye.
Yeah, what we did is we decided it was at Star West. So shout out to Star West and Techwell.
Thanks,
We were basically at the Anaheim Disneyland Hotel, and we were amazed to find that despite it being Disneyland, the actual bartender was like an old Italian guy, and it felt like a real bar. And we're like, this is so weird. But anyway,
Nice.
it was a good hotel. Yeah, and so we were testing. We thought we were a testing conference. Let's standardize. It's going to be red vermouth. It's going to be a Manhattan. So it has to be the same glass, the same vermouth, the same cherry, and the same bitters. But try 3 different whiskeys. Let's do a bourbon, a rye, and a Canadian. So we did, I think, a Crown Royal, a Bullet Rye, and I think we did, I forget the bourbon, it may have been a Knob Creek, but I don't remember which. But it was a bourbon, a rye, and a Canadian, and we did a blind tasting where we all three tried all 3 of them, and the bartender only knew which was which, and we found the rye was by far the best.
Mm-hmm.
I should hang out with y'all at conferences more.
Yes.
Well, that's for sure. We could do this is a martini. So I guess my drink is a martini, but it's not a regular martini. I've taken a martini and I've blended it with, wrote this down, a shot of pastis and a shot of obviously vermouth. But it's called a 3rd degree martini, so it has a licorice flavor, but it still bases gin. It's very good, and I love licorice and aniseeds. For me, it's perfect.
That's delicious. So to test, we'll have to do a vodka test next time. Because there's lots of high quality vodkas.
Yes.
That you could see how that
Yeah,
compares. We'd have
and
to
you could
pick.
go for like an absolute and maybe a classic Russian, like a Stolinka, you know, maybe do it, yeah, and then something American on the side.
Great foods.
And
Yeah,
something
exactly.
potato and something not potato.
Rice, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, well, there's another field trip or another test for a conference.
Once we get out of this crazy place.
2021.
That's right.
Yeah.
I know. You're probably right. Unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sad.
We do have some questions, by the way,
Awesome.
in the webinar. Do you want me to read some of them out? And we have comments
Sure.
too. So Bob Johnson, hello Bob, writes to us, I'm drinking a local beer to end my week. So cheers. So cheers, Bob.
Cheers, Bob.
I want to join your stories about EU breakfast. So we could do like a tipsy testing slash, you know, strange breakfast. We could
Breakfasty testing. There we go.
breakfast or just, yeah. I can't think of a good thing that rhymes right now. It's too many drinks. But that would be interesting. And then he also said, Bob Johnson says, he had a comment saying your idea about learning to program using a script that will be useful to you. He says that's called RPA, which is not quite the same thing because RPA is using a process rather than a code. But there is a benefit though in that you've got a task you do 30 times a day. If you're not a programmer, you can use an RPA tool to automate the task.
Absolutely.
But the questions
it certainly could apply to RPA, but it also could apply to other non-RPA things like, man, I got to type in all these passwords 30 times a day. It'd be nice if I could just bust out a little script that would do that for me. So not really RPA, but certainly RPA would fit into what I'm talking about, and I think what you're talking about as well.
Yep. And we've used RPA ourselves. I mean, there were times when we would have to we had to update the price on all our subscriptions of our product, and it was like, oh my god, we got to go into this credit card tool, and the hundreds of subscriptions, we have to update the price of them all. And so we put a spreadsheet, put an RPA tool. I was like, oh my god, this is great. And it's so easy not to do that. There's like a tipping point between if you do it 5 times, oh, don't bother. But if it's 100 times, so where is that tipping point between doing it by hand or actually spending the time to learn something? But anyway, the questions we have from Bob were also, what are your thoughts on AI testing? And then Mas Kono, hi Mas, says, I'm a long-time listener of this platform, of this channel. First-time question asker. Something you have seen in testing the last 2 to 3 years that you were surprised that caught traction or became more popular than you thought it would. So I'm going to say the 2 questions then for our what are your thoughts on AI testing, and what is a trend that caught on that you didn't think would?
So Moss is a friend and former boss of mine. So hey, dude, thanks for joining. God, what have I seen that? He's also a metalhead. So he's good people.
Cool.
What have I seen that surprised me? I think the speed with which people or teams and organizations want to jump into using AI to help them do their testing surprised me at first. So shout out to Bob Johnson there as well. Hey, right on. But looking back at it, I think there are 2 reasons why it should not have surprised me. One is everybody wants to reduce testing time and testing effort. So the more things they can get machines to do, they believe it's more valuable. And in many, many cases it is. And in many, many cases it's not, hence the whole taking care of business blog post, right? There's a business aspect to what we're doing. And if we are not taking care of that business aspect, we may be making some poor decisions about what's going to impact either our opportunity cost or our total cost of ownership or both. So I think that surprised me at first, and then now I'm like, no, it totally makes sense that people are adopting that. But the other aspect is really at its core, what is AI for testing? It's an evolution on top of automation, which totally makes sense, right? We've gone to a certain extent with what we can and can't do with automation. And yes, people are still trying to make it do more things than it's capable of doing. And they'll learn one way or the other, right? They'll join podcasts like this, or they'll read, or they won't get all the expectations met that they're hoping for. And that hopefully will sort of train the brain as well. But also there's the okay, we've gone as far as we can. We're making good business decisions, right? these are the things we can do, these are the things we can't. Wait, now there's this new technology that perhaps can help us out with this.
Mhm.
And what I've seen from a lot of the AI testing world sort of tools is a focus on test case, test script, test whatever generation, which is back for the old record and playback and drag and drop. But also they're focusing on the maintenance part, which really does my heart good, right?
That's
Because
the hard thing.
if you look at the life of an automation initiative, most of the time is going to be spent on maintenance if you don't plan for it up front. You want to spend your time creating value or enabling value. Maintenance is sustaining value. You would like to minimize your sustaining and increase your delivery, right? Increase your gaining of value. And if you minimize your maintenance, you go a long way to helping yourself out with that. And if the AI tools can help us with that, then yeah, I'm pretty well on board with that. But what I do think is, again, for most of the companies and the tools that are out there, what they have now is largely corner cases, niche filling. Nothing wrong with that. There are niches to be filled. But I think what the companies and teams learn from what's out there now for the next evolution, the next iteration that's going to come in the next years, somewhere between 2 and 5, I think that becomes way more interesting with, okay, how do we apply these AI principles and these AI faculties that we have now to exploit them to their highest value and minimize the impact of costs so we can go spend our time doing our core competency.
I agree. Maintenance is always the killer. Everyone always wants to build new things. They see something, build a new test, but no one wants to maintain the old stuff. And that's your value destroyed right there. So the question from Mass was about something that caught traction. So something that you thought got traction that you didn't expect. I mean, there's a couple of things came to mind as you were answering. One is that everyone wanting to build their own framework has caught traction, and I wish it hadn't. Because,
Right.
I mean, and you talk about this all the time. People, you hire a new person to your team, and I'm going to build a test framework, and I'm going to build this thing, and then they leave the company, and someone else joins, and then they're going to build the framework. So suddenly, this whole idea that you have to have a custom-built framework that someone has built for you seems to have caught traction in the last 2 or 3 years, and unfortunately, it's destroyed value because it means you become an essential person for no reason. You end up becoming a bottleneck to the teams that can't automate more widely because you become this impediment. So that's one thing I've seen. Now, one thing that has caught fire that I didn't expect, but is really cool in a good way, was chaos engineering. So I think it was last year I was in Swiss Testing Day in Zurich, and was it March, May? March last year. And this is back when you could travel, so it's kind of cool. And I met the guy from Netflix who was talking about this. We unplug things, and we unplug things and randomly, and things break, and we design around it. And that was like, oh, that's a cool idea. And then, yet, by the time we were back in the fall, already there were a lot of the conferences were talking about chaos engineering. It had become a thing, and yet it's still a really new idea. And suddenly, Netflix did this thing, and it was completely avant-garde and out there. And within 6 to 9 months, it's now become a thing you do. You plan for this. You plan to deliberately engineer chaos into your organization, and it's gone from being something that was completely out from left field to being mainstream in about 9 months, which I thought was pretty cool.
So a couple of things on the chaos engineering and the chaos testing there. One is back when I was at the telecommunications company back in the 90s, we had a chaos engineer as well. His name was Charles. And what he would do is he would walk down and physically pull boards out of the telephony switch, out of the computer that was making the calls.
Right.
Is it still running? Is it still good? All right, let me slide it back in. Wow. So Charles, if you're listening, shout out, the original chaos monkey from my world there, right? The other thing is sort of this chaos testing aspect has some roots, and they may know it, they may not, in something called high volume automated testing, which I'm totally sort of enthralled with. And it's the notion of taking what you have from an automation standpoint and applying it differently. And when we say high volume, we're not talking about performance or load testing. We're talking about running a large volume of stuff through your system. And in some cases, it's a large volume of workflow scripts. And in some cases, it's parameterized checking. And the one that I really like, and we've got this thing called the random link clicker. Again, shout out to Moss and back when he was at TI, was the idea just randomly go through their website and click, looking for stuff that is weird, weirdness. So what's weird? Well, if you get a 400, it's probably weird. You probably don't want to have that. 500. And in some cases, if the word error appears on the page, that might be a bad thing. So you sniff out the HTML source and say, look, the word error is there. And what you wind up with is a huge pile of stuff that didn't look weird, and a hopefully smaller pile of stuff that did look weird. And as a tester, you go through and evaluate the stuff that was you failed my heuristic. You go in the stuff that was weird first and say, no, that was fine. We're doing a push at that point, and this is a fine. We know, oh, wait, this one's interesting. Let me go back and reproduce it.
Right. Yeah, when testers say this is a bit weird, instead of saying, oh, that wasn't in the test script, what's going on? It's like, oh, wow, we should stop and think about that. Because we have the same thing. We do a lot of formal testing of our tools, and then we'll have our exploratory tester will go and do something, and literally it'll be in Google Chat like, check out this test run. This is weird. And I'm always like, oh, what did you find? and Jessica, it's Elise. She's always finding these weird things, and she doesn't know quite how she got them. And we're like, nah, that's not important. Then we go, wait a second. And it's that wait a second pause, and you go back and go, oh my goodness, thank God we didn't release with this as it was. So if you're listening to Elise, I know we gave you shit sometimes, but credit to you.
Shout out to Elise.
Strong work, Elise.
Yeah. Because I know we're like, how do you reproduce that? I don't know, but it's weird. I'm like, yeah, it's weird. So that's good. Okay, I've got some more questions. Sorry, Jessica, I've got more questions on the go to webinar chat here from Rob Johnson. Just says we were invited to his house. This is, I guess, all three of us in Salt Lake City to taste wine and bourbon.
Yes,
I'm in.
We're there.
Now you may regret this. 2021, we're going to fly in. If there are still airlines and they still have a hub at Delta in Salt Lake City, we're going to be there. Oh yeah.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're going to be there.
Regret that. I mean,
we're going to show up randomly.
Thank you.
We're going to engineer chaos at your house. We're going to show up randomly on a Friday at 5 o'clock, someday next year, and we're like, hey, you invited us. We didn't say when.
Y'all. Hey, what are you doing?
Exactly. Sorry, but we do have another question. Thanks, Bob. He says Rapise, which is our tool, is a great RPA tool. Thank you. It is a good tool. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now we have another guy, Michael Larson, who I remember meeting at some conferences. I have to read this out because I'm sorry. I think I've had too many drinks, but I don't understand this. PV5150 or Mesa triple rectifier. Seriously.
Okay, those are amplifiers. I know Michael as well. What's up, Michael?
Okay.
Former lead singer of a heavy metal band, current lead singer of a heavy metal band, and high-end test consultant.
Yes.
I know Michael from the conference. I didn't know he was involved with music. So a PV5150 or Mesa triple rectifier. Seriously, how to effectively make cross-platform scripts that can run in multiple environments, or is that too much of a unicorn? Question mark.
How to write? Read me that last part again.
Sorry. I think the first part was just a joke. Okay, seriously, how to?
No, he's serious about that, but I can't answer that one. The second one, maybe.
How to effectively make cross-platform scripts that can run in multiple environments.
So
browser environments, or does he mean like Windows, Linux, Mac?
I'm going to assume, and we know what happens when you do that. I'm going to assume he's talking about both cross-browser and cross-environment, right? You got dev and QA, whatever, but possibly also cross-OS as well. If you want to go cross-OS, the first thing you have to decide is, do I have a tool that'll go cross-OS?
Cross-OS, he says. By the way, he clarified this right now.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Michael. If you want to go cross-OS, then you have, in my experience, two choices. You either have to have a tool that will go cross-OS, and then you can write your script in that tool and just run it on the others. Right? Because much like Java, automation is write once, test everywhere. But also if that's not feasible for one reason or the other, what you do is you have your business logic, your test driving script thingy, whatever that is, the test script, in some intermediate shareable format, whatever that is, text file, JSON, XML, or whatever, and then that gets parsed, interpreted by whatever tool you have underneath. And then you can run it cross-platform, but there's a lot more testing there because potentially you're debugging your own software, and then lower than that, a different set of your own software, and then the interaction with whatever tool you're using. And if you're using tool A on one platform and tool B on the other platform, and you get different results, where's the issue? Where's the incompatibility? Is it at the test? Is it at the intermediate software? Is it in the tool? Is it on the OS? Is it on the file system? Is it on the blah, 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 blah? So is it a unicorn? No. Lots of people really want to be able to do these things. It goes to as much as I usually drive the conversation around value and business, this is actually a technical question that's driven by business as opposed to business that's driven by technology. And it's, if you don't have that technology, should you? And if you don't, then maybe you don't have a consistent set of scripts. You have a consistent checklist or a consistent script. And I don't mean a test script. I mean, somebody's written down something. Here's what all the steps need to do. And you implement that in your different tools on your different OS environments.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard problem to solve, and I don't want to restate some of what Paul said, which is a great answer. One thing that we have found that really helps, particularly when you're dealing with environments, is having a consistent set of at least images. Because one of the challenges we had before is we were using physical machines before the Amazon and the VM world. What do we have? Well, we need to test on this, this, and this. What machines do we have lying around? We'll format them with Linux, format them with Windows 10, format that with Windows 8, format that with Windows XP, whatever it was we had. And so you've got a whole bunch of random machines, completely different specs and completely different hardware bases installed with random versions of the operating system, which might be randomly updating at random times. So you've introduced so much noise in the system. So I think the key is before you start with any scripts or code, at least understand your environments. If you're going to have these 20 standard images, it's Windows 10 build 1440. It's this version of Linux from Red Hat. It's this version of Ubuntu. All those different environments, have them all standardized, be able to snapshot them, and then know what your users are using too, because you can't model everything. So model what the users are most likely to be using, and then build your scripts off of that. So the environment management is often neglected, but is an important part of it as well, I think.
I totally agree. And I skipped past that because I know Michael knows a lot of this stuff already. But for the people who aren't Michael and don't know this stuff, I think your info was totally spot on and totally valuable as well.
Cool. And Bob Johnson says Salt Lake City is a big Delta hub. So I think he's saying we're all there. We're all there. Cool.
I would be so happy to get on any airplane right now.
InflectraCon 2021, Salt Lake City. No.
There you go. Oh, right on.
Oh, it's a great place.
Speaking of 21, once we get out of this current situation and get back into the workplace and companies start to beef up their workforces again, what jobs are going to be more required in the marketplace post shelter in place? And this is from Sam Cyberks. What jobs will be more required in the post shelter in place marketplace?
What jobs are going to be more required?
Presumably in testing and software development specifically, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and narrow it down to that. I don't know if they're going to be more. I think right now is the time of churn for those jobs. And then when the new normal happens, a lot of those jobs are just going to kind of stick because they've been deemed valuable. Lots of companies who were, no, you must be here, or even as a consultant, no, we have to have someone on site. Well, that's not logistically possible right now, right? Unless you're an essential business, then that's a whole different kind of thing. But as an aside, tires are an essential business, says the guy who had a blowout on the side of the road the other day. But tires are an essential business. But when we're talking about the logistics of how we do our jobs, and now for companies that were in organizations that were totally 100% anti remote work, well, now we're being forced into remote work, right? Or they're being forced into remote work. And in a lot of cases, it's going to work out well, and they're going to rethink their decisions on that. Also, what we're looking at here is a change in the way a lot of the jobs are. So I know of a company that had a huge sort of customer support organization. Well, they can't come and sit in the call center now, can they?
Mm-hmm.
They sent them all home and sent them laptops and said, do your job from home. All of a sudden, now they're doing this job remotely. If it works out well and economically for them, because there's an almighty dollar aspect of what's going on here as well.
Mm-hmm.
If it works out well, all of a sudden they're not constrained to hire within an X mile radius. Now they've got an entire country, a potentially entire world to hire from. And I think we're going to see a lot of that going forward. So if I were to say, what's the one thing we're going to, from a skill standpoint, or what's that magic thing, the ability to work at home effectively, because not everybody can do it, and that's okay. Not everybody's built to be in a room all day in a house by themselves doing their job. I'm not built for it. I'm an extreme extrovert and I miss people, but I make excuses. At lunch, I go to the store, or I eat lunch at the down the street, or I have lunch with a friend that I used to work with, or whatever. I mean, not now, obviously, but
Right.
but you figure out how to manage yourself that way, and some people are highly effective that way. And I think companies are going to start to realize that, can I work remotely alone effectively, is a valuable job skill.
Yeah, two things that came to my mind. One is that it's interesting. We, obviously, in this market, a lot of customers of ours are unsure of their economics, what's going on. But we had some new customers come. There's people we haven't ever heard of before, which were out of the blue. One was a company in London that does virtual reality, and they do virtual reality for like rock concerts. So it's very appropriate for Tipsy Testing. What they do is you can be at home with a VR headset, and you can basically be in the front row of the not the Burb, the Whiskey a Go Go in LA, or you could be at the Live Nation. You can be at Wembley. You can literally be there, but obviously that's highly complex software. So things around VR and augmented reality are probably going to become more mainstream, potentially. And so if you're in terms of skills, if you're a software engineer or tester, being able to test things in the VR or AR space is going to be huge. And also, if you look at what we're doing now, we're doing this on a GoToWebinar. We've done Zoom. I mean, who's testing Zoom? Who's testing GoToWebinar? Tools that help and testers will need to be far more fluent on video testing. The fact that a call might be choppy might have been considered a side bug. Oh, well, the software works, but it's a bit choppy and low bandwidth. Well, now everyone's working at home potentially, and this pandemic might come back and might go in waves. So being able to test the low bandwidth, people working from home, with your kids all using Netflix. So I think skills that were undervalued around low bandwidth testing, VR, streaming video, all of those things become much more important. And the second skill I think that has been undervalued but has become more important is almost like the emotional intelligence of dealing with your coworkers and requirements and features. Because when we were all in an office together, if I didn't understand something, I could go over and talk to someone else. Now you can't. So being able to write well and communicate well, written and oral, is really important. And people who were engineers, I'm a software engineer, I don't need to go to that English class in school. I don't care if I flunk out of AP English. Those skills are becoming more important, because if you can't communicate to your fellow engineer, potentially working in a different time zone or a different place, that actually limits your ability to be effective.
That's some great thoughts. I had not thought of either of those. Those are good.
What do you think? Am I smoking crack, or are they? You think there's some value in that? You think, or
those aren't mutually exclusive, Adam?
Well, that's true. Not legal in Maryland yet, so don't worry.
What lessons can businesses learn about managing risk with respect to the coronavirus from managing other kinds of risks, such as software development? Paul?
Oh, sure. Put me on the spot for the nasty one.
You want me to do this one first?
No, I got it.
Okay.
So going back to what I was talking about is there was the company that basically sent their 200 or whatever customer support people laptops. That's an unexpected expense, right? So if you're sending them consumer level laptops, conservatively, that's what, in the $500 range, probably. So times 200, that's an unexpected expenditure. So on one hand, you need to save and prepare for a rainy day, but you have to balance that with, okay, if I took that money and I invested it in this other area, what would the revenue be, right? So this is where we really put on our business hat and talk about risk. So from a testing standpoint, a large part of what I believe testing brings to the table is uncovering risks and explaining where we have not uncovered risks. So here's some risks that I found, right? These are issues, things that aren't working, things that I thought would work differently, whatever. Oh, and by the way, here's some stuff that if I had more time, I would go and investigate. Are you prepared to push to production? And in a lot of cases, the right answer is yes, because we are able to handle an outage for production, right? We've got some bandwidth built up. We've got a war chest. We've got a whatever for that. Applying that same notion to the I won't say completely unexpected, but the highly unlikely notion of this, everybody stays at home and a bunch of people are furloughed and laid off and businesses are closing, just tragic, unfortunate stuff. Do you prepare for that from do we have a war chest, or are you all in? Those are all different types of risk assessments that each company and each organization is going to have to, well, I guess at this level, what we're talking about, each company is going to have to make at their level and at their, with their context, much like testing, what you test and what you don't test and what you're willing to roll out is very context dependent on what your business is, what your ability to recover, what your cost of failure is. Same corporately is, what's your cost of failure? If you furlough a bunch of people, but they're highly sought after individuals, and other companies are either not furloughing or are offering higher incentives when the unfurloughing happens, you may lose a good contingent of that. And that's important to you or it's not. You know, the human aspect aside, the cold, ugly business aspect, those people are replaceable and easily, or they are not. And if they're not, then you probably need to have some additional safety nets along the way there. And I don't always believe or think the way that I talk here because I've got this sort of human side to me. Y'all be quiet over there. I do have this this human side to me that says, wow, I feel dirty and ugly for talking in these business aspects, but when it comes down to a business decision, sometimes it gets ugly and you have to make those unfortunate things, says the guy who was in leadership during telecom layoffs. That was a very ugly time.
In the 2000s, back in the yeah.
Yes, this would have been like the early 2000s. It was just a very, very, very unfortunate and uncomfortable time.
The lucid.
Yeah, I won't get into that anymore. That's a non-recorded conversation. but yeah, I think that how you apply risk to your software deliveries can reflect how you impact your bit or develop your risk tolerance and your risk safety for the corporation as well, but they might need to diverge because one has a direct human impact, the other has, in most cases, an indirect human impact. But there's also a different type of risk associated with each. So you might make different decisions, but you might go through the thought process the same way. Here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and here's the risk I'm willing to take.
Definitely. Yeah. Adam, do you have some thoughts on that too?
I mean, it's interesting. I was watching the movie The Big Short, if you remember that, with which feels like
Yep.
that was the previous crisis we were in,
Yes.
with Brad Pitt. And there's a great scene where Brad Pitt says, "Well, the thing about banking is that numbers reduces people to numbers, and that when the stock market dips 1%, some X thousand people basically die." And so when we think about what's going on from a business standpoint, there's an economic impact and there's a health impact. So if I own a business, I could potentially reopen parts of the business, and I could therefore increase the economics of some of my employees and some of my workers and customers. But there's a health impact. And I think what it made me think of was a talk that Paul did, I think, a few years ago in SCPCon, where he talked about business risk. So a tester will always say there's a bug, we found some issues, and the developer will say, oh no, it's fine, let's just ship. And the manager's job is to assess the business and technical risk and look at those and weigh them and make a decision and almost absolve the testers or the developers from the moral imperative of making that decision. I'm the manager. I take your data from the tester. I understand what you're saying, what you found. I understand the risk you've identified. The developer, I'm going to make a business decision to do or not to do, to release or not to release. But I ultimately am taking a business decision based on data. And so it's the same thing for a business in this situation, is that if we decide to open in a limited capacity, obviously once the government says we can, that potentially people could potentially become sick because of doing that. On the other hand, if I don't do that, people may go hungry, and there's health issues for that. So as a business or a government, you're always balancing the risks of doing or not doing. The problem is that it's to a lot of people who work. If you're a health professional, which is like a tester, you're going to work in the absolutes of, I found this issue, we can't ship. And if you're a business executive, you might be in the grounds of, we have to open because otherwise people are going to lose their lives because they can't afford to eat. And so somewhere in the middle, someone has to take all that data and decide what is the risk adjusted worst best I can do. If I was to open but with these conditions, can I maximize these set of criteria which minimizes the economic risk, maximizes the economic upside, and minimizes the health risk? And so that's what you do in software all the time. You're always deciding, based on what I know today, if I release with just this one piece of functionality, I know the risks are understood, I'm going to not release this other piece, or if I release it, I'm going to do it in a way that to one customer, I'm going to be able to therefore roll back quickly if there's a problem. In the same thing, a government or a business could decide it will open, and if we find this is not working out, there's major issues, we can roll back. A lot of the lessons about being able to release and then unrelease could be applied in both public health and I think the businesses that are trying to operate in this environment. I don't know.
I agree. No, that's it, because I think both of our answers revolve around risk, and it's applying a sort of a judicious idea of which risk you're prepared to take, and the understanding that some of the risks you're prepared to take may impact human life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Way to bring the team down, man.
I'm sorry.
I know. I was just going to say that's really serious. I think it looks like we don't have any more questions from the audience. Is that your sense too, Adam?
There's one here where Bob says it is ski season in Salt Lake City.
Perfect.
Presumably next year, or is it now? Is it ski season now still? No.
Could be, but we can try to get that Delta flight for ski season next year.
I think Bob's going to regret ever writing this on the chat. I don't know if he's had his own private tipsy testing. We're going to be all arriving on his house in like, I don't know, February next year, and he'd be like, "Hey, who are these strangers at my house?" Like, "Hey, invite us. We brought our friends." It's like an army. It's like a scene in Weird Science where they all arrive at the house.
Yes, and we have a video of this to remind you that you said this.
That's right. But we do have one more question, and I think this is a slightly lighter note on which to end. For Paul, from Jonathan Freeman, how do you keep that dome so shiny?
Top lighting, man. Top lighting. Shine it down, it goes. Plus a little sweat and nervousness, or actually not nervousness, a little anxiety helps out with that as well.
Well, it looks good.
And I'm telling the guy who has a crown much like mine, although his beard is much more magnificent than mine is.
That's hard to believe.
Oh, no. The man has an epic beard.
maybe we will catch him on the Tipsy Testing flip sometime.
Oh, maybe so. You listen, Jonathan?
Are you out there?
Well,
And
I'd like
Bob
to,
says I have room. By the way, Bob says I have room. Come on. For February.
well, now
there
it's
you
kind
go.
of a done deal.
I will endorse this. Endorsed.
Yes, we'll be there.
I love pointing at the camera. It's great. Look at
It's
that.
so weird, isn't it? Like, because the perspective is totally screwed.
Yes.
It's like
I'll
being in
see you
school.
later.
It's like in that video from Twisted Sister where they have like the teacher goes shooting up into the roof. It's like,
Yep.
what do you want to do with your life? Yeah.
I want to rock. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to give a shout out to Paul for being with us here today. He's going to be speaking at SauceCon coming up online. Do you have a date for that, Paul?
May-ish something
Great.
or something.
SauceCon in May. I'm
Go
sure
to
it's
saucecon.com and you'll find it there, or on my website, if you my blog, responsibleautomation.wordpress.com, and go to upcoming events. You can see all the shenanigans that I am up to.
shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
Yes.
I like shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
Perfect for the weekend. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Paul, for being with us. It's been great to catch up with you. Thank you for
Thank
our
you for
really
having me.
engaged crowd today. That was a ton of fun to have all the comments and questions in advance.
Thanks, Bob.
Adam?
And yeah, thanks, Bob, for joining, and Michael. And hold on, Mas, please come back next time. We want to see you.
Peace
See you
out.
next Friday.
Thank you.